minute?
About 47 seconds.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we'll get started here real quick. Thanks for coming out and hanging out with us at lunchtime. We're going to talk a little bit about our current projects and where we've been and where we're going. And we've called this one the Three Rings of Circus Maximus. And it's basically us three guys, which I guess we're big guys. No. Bad joke. All right. Anyway, let's get started a little bit about the history of where we came from. We were a team that was assembled by Python Angelo as he was trying to get Pinball Circus built and shown to the masses. James, you want to talk a little background? Well,
Sorry, is his volume good? Okay. In 2012, if some of you have not heard the story, we started working with Python Angelo on his dream to get the Pinball Circus into production. And so we started working on that and have been working on that for the past 5.5 years. A couple of years ago, we had the idea of doing Kingpin as well. And going forward, we sort of put that on the shelf until last year. There was a few events that came together, a few people that came together that gave us the catalyst to go forward with the project. And so on December 29th, we decided that we were going to start building the game that is in our booth right now. And so our goal was to have it ready for play here at the show. Foreplay, that's your category, right? So we have it here at the show. Paul's got a little bit more background of what it took to get it ready for the show in 2.5 months. So I'll let him take it and Jimmy take it.
So as James mentioned, first screw was put on the machine December 29th, but it kind of goes back to the origins actually sort of are related to the Texas Pinball Festival here. About 3 years ago, we were talking with Mark Ritchie and kind of exchanging stories about Python Angelo and how he worked with him. And the topic of Kingpin kind of popped up again. And since that time, it's always been on our mind as something that we would like to do. But it wasn't until this year at Expo at 2017 and our delirious drive home from lack of sleep that we decided, gee, we can put this thing together in about 3 months. It sounded good on the way home, I'll tell you that. And so the long ride home from Expo was talking about, well, how can we do this? Do we think we can do it? What kind of milestones we have to come up with? And that's kind of where the origin of the project started, at about 2 a.m. in the middle of Indiana and Chicago and Illinois, driving home to Atlanta. In November, we decided to take a research trip, and we have a friend that allowed us access to his machine. And the only thing crazier than three guys and some other people helping us trying to build a Kingpin in 3 months is the guy that lets us take apart his Kingpin and strew parts all across his collection of his game. And so we went out there, documented the game, did what we researched the parts that we were going to have to build. And kind of a little side note, as you can tell, the #1 job requirement for people at Circus Maximus is Diet Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
That's our beverage of choice.
The official beverage of
Official
Circus
beverage
Maximus.
of Circus Maximus, yes.
That allows us to work into the 4 a.m., 5 a.m. hour and still be somewhat effective.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got. So we mentioned December. In December is kind of when we started assembling the game that you see out there. We started with a bare cabinet and a bare play-field, lots of Mountain Dew, and continued. Basically, at that point, we started assembly of the ball guides, plotting and scheming wire looms. James, you got anything to kind of add about our first steps with
Well, to back up to when we were able to take a machine completely apart, Steve Sabota, good friend. If you've never met him, you should. You're a better person if you know Steve Sabota. The joke was that Steve came down and we were looking at the game, and he says, well, go ahead and have at it. And then he said, well, I've got to go get some stuff to make pizza. And so when he was gone, by the time he got back, that was the picture he saw, was his machine strung out all over his game room. So that was...
And then we followed up with a whole lot of oops and lots of other things to make someone quite nervous if he didn't really know what was going on.
But do you have the slide? What's the slide on the play field? Do you have that?
Some of assembly, or which one?
Yeah, that's when we started assembling the play field. So that was probably January 1, 2, or 3, somewhere in there. We're using the P-Rock board system. We've mounted most of the components underneath the play field so that we only have 8 wires, I believe it is, going from the cabinet up to the back box, which makes it easier as far as dropping the playfield in and out. The wiring, we hand wired the entire thing. Took a matter of, I think, 2 weeks. A lot of Diet Mountain Dew.
We actually hand wired it twice.
Yes. We'll get to that story in a moment. But all along at that time, we were also trying to figure out what code we were going to run this thing on. We didn't want to bring it to the show with just a basic, generic, flip the ball kind of thing, which is pretty much where we were at with Circus when we brought it out.
We were actually working 2 paths. The emulation side, which Jimmy here is responsible for in its entirety, and then the custom code game, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit in a minute. But we were kind of working both paths until we saw one was ahead of the other. We were working them dual and figured out which way we were going to go towards in the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks is when the decision was made. And we'll talk a little bit more about that process in a bit. Some of the prototyping stuff we did, I'm a big proponent of 3D printing. It helps us, James says my favorite word is iterate. It helps us iterate quickly. So we temporarily would print 3D brackets and things that we could design and print quickly and test some of the dimensions. And then James, being kind of the master fabricator that he is, would go back and make a more permanent or final bracket. This was for the slot machine mechanism, and this one was kind of interesting. We tried several different ways that we thought might improve or make it easier to work the slot machine on it. And for those of you that don't know, on Kingpin, there's a hotel in the back left of the playfield called Hotel Lex, and inside that hotel, through the windows, you can see the slot machine that spins, and it's used in several modes of the game. And the original game had a DC motor in it, and we tried continuous rotation servos. We've tried a DC servo. James would say we wasted probably about 2 weeks of time trying something other than the way they did it originally.
And when he says we, it's these 2 guys. All right? I was the one that kept saying the 30 RPM motor, we got to go that way. No, these 2 guys.
So we decided, okay, let's try it the way they originally did it, and ordered a 30 RPM motor that came and looks to be exactly the same motor they used on the original game, as far as we can tell. And I believe the same guy signed the QA slip on it.
Number 1,
20
yes,
years
yeah,
ago.
yeah.
I mean, they look identical. It's quite amazing. So yeah, we eventually ended up back with the exact same. I think we even have the exact same opto, just by coincidence, that was used in the original Kingpin. About 30 days before Texas, we didn't like how the playfield was wearing, and we decided to take it completely apart and clear coat the playfield. So actually, it's probably less than 30 days ago. This was James who'd had enough. We were ready to tear our hair out, and we took everything off the top side, everything off the bottom side, and got it clear coated. And that's what you guys see out there now today, and we're pretty happy with how the second set of clear turned out.
And another note is that trash can is 3/4 full of...
Yeah, you can kind of see down Diet Mountain Dew cans. I'm pretty sure I probably should buy stock in, I don't know, Pepsi or whoever the heck this stuff is. But yeah, it was kind of, the pucker factor was pretty high. We had a game completely assembled, mechanically complete, We had emulation code, basic emulation code running on it, and here we are 30 days before with taking the entire thing apart. It was a week that I will never forget, the stress involved with that.
Yeah, that was, and the beautiful thing about it is that's the only hiccup that we had during the entire process
You
of
know,
getting
you've done
that
it
game
now.
ready.
You've mentioned that. We haven't made it through TPF yet, James.
I know. We got it ready for this.
Yeah, it's been amazingly smooth sailing. When we had issues or stuff we thought that was going to be a roadblock or something that would take significant amounts of time, those ended up not being the things. It ended up being the stupid ideas we had about improving the slot machine mechanism that took up more of our time than, us again. So yeah, it's been, 30 days ago was quite a journey. Coding. So James and I are outside of Atlanta, and Jimmy is in Austin, Texas. So we do an awful lot of FaceTiming, since the game was in Atlanta and our coding guru was in Austin. And I'll turn it over to Jimmy to kind of talk a little bit of how the emulation came together.
Sure. First, like company HR matters. So, I'm sure most of you know these two individuals here. For those of you who don't, it's a very high intensity insanity environment when working with James and Paul. For those of you who don't know, Paul is the pinball pimp from the Pins and Vids DVDs. He dresses up in all sorts of things. So there's a lot of antics here, and James is just James. And it's been a lot of fun working with these guys. So I live in Austin, but I used to live just outside of Atlanta. So working on Circus was somewhat easier from a standpoint of being able to get down there. Circus was a very different game, though. It had 7 flippers and just a bunch of different mechs. It was very Rube Goldberg. And then actually getting the call that basically said, hey, we really want to do Kingpin, that was going to exercise a different part of my brain.
I was really hoping Jimmy would have told us we were nuts and just say, don't do it. But he was just as crazy as we were, and he said, hell yeah, let's get this done by TPF.
Absolutely, and that was kind of where all that began. And Paul asked me one day, he said, all right, well, we can do custom code or we can do emulated code. If we do emulation, is it quote-unquote bigger than a bread box? And I said, well, it usually is. Right, the last 2% takes 98% of the time. And I went ahead and said, okay, well, I think we can do this, and started kind of tearing into it. And for those of you who own Capcom games, you know that there are certain parts on that Capcom board that are no longer available. They're proprietary to Capcom, so they're very difficult to reverse engineer. But we set out looking at schematics and things like that, loaded up PinMame to see kind of where their emulation was, and there were just a lot of things that just didn't work. And one of the issues was that ASIC chip. So I called James and say, hey, can we get some information about how this ASIC chip's running? Because he actually has, some Capcom games and things like that. And he brings out this big tetanus-ridden scope from 1970 something that's got,
tubes.
With tubes in it.
CRT based, yeah.
He probes it up there and he sends me a picture and he's like, it's this. And I have no idea what the scaling is on it. And it's like just one line and a bunch of ghosting everywhere. So I said,
I think
okay.
the words were, it's approximately this.
Yeah. So it was a little interesting, but honestly, it was a lot of fun. A lot of, 3 o'clock, in the morning, coding sessions and things like that where Paul was absolutely a trooper. Again, I say that our game was sponsored by FaceTime because we just didn't have any means. I didn't have a game there. So
I would actually take my phone and stick it between the flippers.
Basically, yeah. So he'd
So he could
FaceTime
see
me.
the screen and everything.
Yeah. He'd sit it right on the flippers, and I'd say, okay, do you smell smoke yet? Okay, well, all right, we'll keep going yet. All right, do you smell smoke yet? Okay, and usually that would get us pretty far. And it was pretty much, just 3 weeks out or whatnot that we kind of started cracking on the emulation side. And then really and truly probably took 3 or 4 days until we got all of the game elements working except for that stupid slot machine. And the slot machine was really, really, really difficult because it has one opto and it's like a rotary encoder. And so timing is really, really specific. But we just had a blast working on it and different things like that. And one of the questions that we get a lot of is, hey, well, why do you have such a big LCD screen, but yet the DMD is so small? And we say, well, most of the pinball companies that you see that are emulating DMDs have the same size screen, and it's just the bezel's cut off. Now, for this one, we still have a second part, which Paul can talk about, which is sort of the Kingpin HD type deal where we would have custom code there. But for the show, we decided, let's get emulation going. We want people to play the original Kingpin in the original form, the way that it was intended to be played. And I'll tell you, nothing was scarier than, Mark Ritchie stepping up to your game, and it's like, well, we hope we did it justice because otherwise this is going to be embarrassing. So, but thankfully it's worked out. The game's playing great. And for those of you that haven't played it yet, please do. We're sorry the line's long. We love to have more games here. But absolutely, working on this has just been a blast. A little bit insane at times, but it's been awesome.
And as Jimmy referenced, right now you see a much smaller DMD style display on it. Our intention with the game is, I guess, we kind of don't think of the game as a remake per se. One, there aren't thousands of them out there like an AFM or Medieval Madness, but it's really going to be we're going to have HD graphics, a la some of the newer games out there that are coming out, a newer Stern or any of the new spooky games, full HD graphics, utilizing similar, the same assets that are there, sound calls, music calls. And so we kind of think of it as a newer game that you just happen to be able to play the old ROMs on if you'd like to. It kind of gives you the best of both worlds because the game is 20 plus years old, 22 years old at this point. And so we're kind of straddling the line of between something new and something old to I don't know if appease both sides is the right term, but kind of give people what Kingpin could be if it was built today, but also tickle the nostalgia of the game that was never built.
Yeah, and it runs in a completely new board system in it. By the way, it is running on the P-Rock type board system that now Spooky uses for TNA, and of course is in all the P3s, the Wizard blocks and stuff that are out there. So that was sort of where my expertise was, I suppose, is with that hardware platform. So it's running all that new stuff, but the original code on it. So it should play exactly like the original.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've explained it clear. The end product will actually have the original code in it, which will be tweaked and pretty much completed, but we will also have a new code in it, which will utilize the entire screen. The graphics will be the full-size LCD. When the game is released, it will have both versions of the software in it, so the player can decide which version they want to play, the classic or the new. The new will have additional rule sets. It'll be based on the original, but it'll have new rule sets. It'll have better rule sets. Flowing of the game will be slightly different as far as the sequencing. So it'll be two software packages in one game. So you can choose, again, which one do you want to play? The original as it was intended back in the 90s, or the new code as it is done in the whatever year we finish it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So where do we go from here with Kingpin? So the fun part is we're going to take it home and take it all apart again after Texas. So we're going to know how to take apart and put together a Kingpin quite well here by the time March is over. And so the reason we're going to take it apart is to start building the BOM. We were putting this together with such speed and vigor that we started trying to build and keep track of every nut and bolt and washer that went on it, and realized quite quickly that we would never make TPF if we tried to do it at the same time. So it comes home with us, and probably within the next week we'll be in parts again. And from there, we're going to start building our BOM, working on all the rest of the engineering drawings. We've been making engineering drawings as we have gone through. James actually has some of the original Capcom documentation. We have some of the original tooling related to Kingpin. Those ramps on the game were made off the original tool. You got anything to add about kind of our resources on where we're...
Yeah, we were fortunate when I bought the archives. I call it the archives. I've got 30 cases of original Capcom CAD drawings, and we were able to pull from that because the game uses a lot of the common Capcom parts, and and I also had some of the original Capcom parts still in stock, so we were able to use those like NOS flipper assembly. Those are Capcom flippers. And then Mark Ritchie supplied us with his CAD print, 2D CAD print of the original CAD drawing, and it's a fully populated print, which allowed us to calculate the dimensions of the brackets and such that we had to manufacture and prototype ourselves.
It was one of those double-edged swords because it had everything on top of the playfield and everything under the playfield and all the inserts, and sometimes discerning what was what when there's 6 lines within about 1/8 of an inch. But it was, without that PDF, this wouldn't have been possible in the time frame that it happened.
Yeah, the ball guides especially, we had to make every ball guide on there, and without the drawing that Mark supplied to us, no way we would have been able to get this done in time. So we had assets and tools to work with so that we could get it done. And thanks to Steve Sabota supplying us some critical pieces, all of it came together so that this game that we have today is able to be played. It's about 98% there, right, Jimmy?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
Too many inside jokes, guys, I tell you. But one of the things that amazed me throughout this whole process was the reaction of current and previous Kingpin owners. They've been immensely supportive and encouraging, and a lot of them have a game that if something breaks, they don't know what to do with it. There's parts on it that can't be replaced. And since we are building and documenting and building engineering documents, and when this game goes to production, we'll have all those. They'll have spare parts for their games, and they're sending us their photos. They're like, if you have any questions, email me. I had one this morning from a previous owner saying, hey, here's my photo archive that I had, from when he owned the game, and he's looking forward to being able to put one on route. And that kind of was an interesting reaction because there were, some people were speculating that, they'd be opposed to this type of project, but the reaction has been quite amazing.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Not only the people that have owned the machines, but also the people that originally designed and worked on the project. Mark Ritchie, he's been very supportive of it. Stan, who did the artwork, he has volunteered to tweak and clean up the back glass, the trans-light.
We've talked to a lot of the original team members that have been, supported, very supportive of, and when we have questions, if they can remember from 20 plus years ago, they're happy to try and point us in the right direction. But a lot of the reactions we get from them is, this is great that people are going to finally be able to see what we were doing 20 years ago, because Capcoms, we were talking to the dots guy, Kevin, and he's like, we were trying to make dots that were better than anything else that were out at that time. And I believe he also worked on Big Bang Bar and some of those too, and he just wants people to see what they worked so hard on during that time, and get people a chance to play it.
Absolutely.
And not only are they wanting it, it's been remarkable the reaction that they give us is that game was their favorite project. And we're talking about some people that had worked at Williams that came forward into Capcom, and they just are elated that game is going to finally see the light of day. That's all those things really inspire us to move forward as fast as we can on it. It's been a remarkable journey, as short as it's been, as far as the period that we've taken to get it to where it is today. Going forward, it's going to be, we're actually doing things in reverse. When we get back, we're taking that one apart, but we're actually going to build a whitewood. So instead of building whitewood first, we actually built a fully graphic game to begin with, and it's a little bit backwards, but that's going to be the process in order for us to break down the BOM and get a true idea of what the final cost is going to be on it. A lot of people have come up and asked us what the target price on it is, and we don't know. it's going to depend on how much it costs to build. If we had to estimate, we'd say 6 to 75, but we can't hold ourselves to it because we just don't know yet. There's some unique mechanisms on there that is going to be a bit costly. So when we figure it out, that's when we'll know what the price is on it.
So one of the things we've done is we have a signed limited edition translate signed by both Mark Ritchie and Stan. We're doing 250 of these. We have, last I checked, 6 or 7 left in the booth that we brought with us. You can also order them online at our website. But kind of one of the interesting things we tried this time is we wanted to gauge the interest of how many people might be interested in owning one. And rather than just putting a list together that might, have 1,000 people on it that really weren't super interested and kind of inflate the numbers, we decided that if you bought a translate, and they're numbered, so if you end up with translate 47, you would have the opportunity to purchase the 47th production machine off the line. So it kind of holds a spot in line. There's no commitment. If it's something you guys want, at the time you want to buy it, you'll be able to. But it was just something new. We were going to try something a little different than normal. We don't believe in using other people's pre-order money to fund the development of a game. It's just something we've been strongly against on our own projects. And so, doing little things like this helps us take a little less money out of our pocket, I guess, and use that. We won't be, people wanted to give us money already multiple times, and we just won't do it. It's not who we are as a company. You have anything to add to that, James? I mean, it's
fielding the questions at the show, a lot of people have asked us, well, why are we doing this before we finished up with Circus Maximus? And they look at us and say, well, you can't even complete one game. How do we have...
Which is a valid reaction, by the way.
Yeah,
we don't fault anybody for
People want to
having
know, well, if you couldn't complete the first one, what gives us confidence you're going to complete the second one? The reason we went forward with this game before we finished Circus is, one, Circus needs a lot of redesign, and we are still working on that. The game as it was originally designed plays like a pig. We're not going to put lipstick on it because it'll still be a pig. It's a fun game to play 2, 3, 4 times and that kind of thing, but it's not a long-term game that's going to be fun for the owner. So we have to do, and working with Python, he had ideas, and he gave us, working with him, we came up with ideas to change the game to make it truly a great playing pinball machine. Right now, it does not play like a pinball machine. That being said, we still have a lot of funds, money to sink into that in order to get it up to where it needs to be. This project is pretty much a ready-made project. We don't have to put a lot into research and redesign. We can get this one out a lot quicker, and what our plans are is whatever we make off of this will allow us to finish the Pinball Circus. So the goal of this is to give us the funding that it will take to finish Circus. It's going to be a significant project going forward as far as Circus goes, and so that's why we moved this up. Our goal, and these are goals, and this is how the deadline, but we hope to have this in production by the end of the year. We've got 3 options on it that we pretty much have to decide which way we want to go with it.
Production-wise.
Yeah, production-wise. We've got the capacity to do it ourselves. Doing it ourselves means we will only be able to do pretty much the same production level as Charlie Spooky when he started out, 20 to 30 games a month. We've got 2 other options, companies that have approached us about it, and if they take it over, the production can be done within months. So we won't know which way we're going to go until we come up with that BOM. The BOM is the key. When we have that, we go back to the companies and say, this is it. We've got all the vendors that have given us quotes. Here's the BOM. what can we arrange? And if we work it out, then it's great. It'll go on the production line. If not, we take the BOM and we build it ourselves. So that's pretty much the plans going forward. But as far as it's going to come down to this guy right here as far as when it's going to be ready for production. That second software set, the new software is going to be the key. So depends on him. Bob?
I think that's pretty much it that we have.
Are we at the 30-minute mark?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. So Paul wants to take all your questions.
Sure, John. We got a mic coming to you real quick. It's for the Twitch stream.
James, I think you mentioned that you got the metal guides from Marco, or did you fabricate the metal guides yourself, the ball guides?
What's that?
The big long metal ball guides. Did you have to fabricate those yourself, or were you able to?
So we actually have an engineer that worked with us on Circus, and we actually had to create engineering diagrams for these in order to make our sample games. The ones you see out there, we ordered, I think, 2 sets of samples from a metal fabricator in Atlanta. And this is partly where the PDF file from Mark Ritchie helped out a lot, is we could take that file and import it into our CAD software and be able to kind of trace the ball guides. You could see where the ball guides would go through the play field, where they were screwed in with a tab. And through that, we could recreate the geometry with relatively closely. We have maybe 4 holes to tweak and a little length to tweak, but it was pretty wild how well you could take that PDF file, which had so many other things on it, kind of obscuring what we really needed, and recreate those.
Yeah, the PDF gave us the length and where the mount points were. It's a 2-dimensional line. And thanks to being able to get to Steve's machine, that gave us the height and the dimension there. And from there, we were able to create our own CAD drawing for each of the ball guides. And that's where the metal shop was able to, their laser cut, and then we assembled the post and everything on it.
Somewhere I have a photo of the big long guide, the one that goes all around kind of the outside orbit and through the back box. Because when they laser cut them, we get them flat so that we can kind of do the bends ourselves and make sure it fits. And the next round, we'll have the metal fabricator do the bends. But so there's a photo of James and I going to pick up these ball guides, and there's a ball guide. I'm standing next to the ball guide, and it's almost as tall as I am. It's such a long ball guide. It's been fun kind of seeing, and just going to the metal fabricator and the guy asking, what is this for? Luckily he's had experience with James getting ramp parts made, that he's not a complete pinball newbie, but it's been wild.
Yeah, the metal shop that I used to fabricate all the metal brackets, for those that don't know, I was in the ramp reproduction business up until 3 years ago, and we made sure that we supplied as much brackets on the ramps that were riveted so that the end user didn't have to. And the reason I bring that up is the metal shop I work with understands the tight tolerances that are in a pinball game. That's a lot of people that are not familiar with pinball think, oh, it's just a pinball game. The tolerance is plus or minus. It's basically military spec kind of stuff. When you have to line up the rivet holes, .125 and all that, and they have to be within thousandths. And so these guys, the metal company that we use to laser cut everything, do a remarkable job.
All right, Wally?
Got Wally before you, Lloyd.
Guys, I had a question about the assemblies that you typically see in other machines, like the jet bumpers, the slingshots, the ball trough. Are you going to go with the Williams design on that, or are you going to go strictly with the Capcom design on some of those assemblies that you normally see in other machines?
So we mentioned that we're going to go back and basically start building a whitewood. So the game that's out there has as many Capcom assemblies on it that we could find, which is the vast majority of those are. We got Capcom bumpers, flippers, slings too, I believe.
Drop targets.
Drop
Yeah.
targets. And so while we're building the whitewood, we're going to explore, the Capcom ball trough is a 2-coil ball trough. It's not a gravity-fed one. So we're going to explore using a more traditional current-style ball trough that would free up another coil potentially. And the same, try out some other options for the drop targets and the pop bumpers and stuff like that.
What it really comes down to is the cost. If we can build the assemblies using the original Capcom drawings, and it comes out cheaper than a Williams, for example, the flipper assembly, it comes down to which costs less in the end. And it's based on how many machines projected that will be built. So if we can recreate the Capcom, we will. That's our original goal.
And one of the nice parts about having a essentially real Capcom parts machine is, and we did this with Circus, is we tried to build the first Circus prototype as close to the original, other than changing the snake area, so that we had a baseline to compare to. So now when we build our whitewood, we can see, is there a negative impact of using different parts to gameplay and feel? Since we'll have the games next to one another and be able to explore that, because we wouldn't want to make a change that necessarily would negatively impact gameplay just to use something else.
Thank you very much. By the way, very impressive, guys. Very nice job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. You have something, Lloyd? Larry, Mo, Curly? No, I'm James Laughlin, for those who don't, haven't ever met me at the shows or anything. I've been in pinball for 30 years. Started out with Six Flags Amusement Centers back in the 80s. Then I basically transitioned through the pinball business over the past 30 years, and for 14 of those years, I manufactured reproduction plastic ramps for the Williams games. And then 3 years ago, sold that off to Larry at Starship. And basically, since then, I've been working on Circus and Kingpin.
I'm Jimmy Lippum. I am pretty much a software engineer. I do systems architecture for Circus Maximus, American Pinball, Valley Dynamo, Multimorphic, Spooky Pinball. Typically, all those the operating system stuff for those games. It's been fun. I've been doing a lot of the start out in homebrew. My Wizard Blocks is actually out there on the floor next to the Multimorphic booth. So I kind of started out doing stuff like that, and then eventually came across these two bozos, and they were like, "Hey, you wanna come do some cool stuff?" And it's been fun ever since, and just having a blast.
I'm Paul Kiefert. I'm probably most known as the second cohort in the Pins and Vids DVD series. So we've done 4 of those. One of them was documenting the Big Bang Bar project that Gene did, and kind of a video magazine. We kind of silly little videos. I'm somewhat of my brother calls me a hobby hoarder, because every year I pick up some new tool or new skill. Last year was CNC machines, so I got a new CNC coming next week, actually, to help with the project. 3D printers, and anything kind of computer controlled to make things, because if I can tell a computer to make something for me rather than me actually using the saws and stuff to do it, I'm a computer guy. That's just more comfortable for me to do. Been in pinball for since the late 90s, I guess, and part of kind of our Atlanta crew is and there's a bunch of Atlanta people here, so it's been fun.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I just wanted to say I'm really excited about this project and glad you've had a lot of support. I had a question. How difficult was it to obtain the rights from Planetary, and are they going to supply the parts going forward, or is that going to be you guys, any kind of replacement items that might be needed down the road?
As far as supplying parts, it comes down to cost. If they can supply the parts that are cheaper than we can give them, if they have original, and I believe they still have some original Capcom stuff. If they've got enough and the price is such that it'll beat whatever we could build it at, we'll use them. As far as rights, that's something that we're working on. It's, we don't foresee any issues. Matt, Rick, I've worked with them in the past, and we get along well. There shouldn't be any problems whatsoever.
Right. One last quick question. The DMD is going to be as it shows now on the original software, correct? Where it's just the center screen and then it'll be full resolution on the new rule set? Is that correct? Is that what I understood?
I mean, we're still kind of figuring out all the final parts of it. I mean, that game is, as I still haven't played a full game of my own on that. I've played a ball here and there. I've been triggering stuff with our fingers as we test it. So, I mean, it's our development machine. That's what we use as our test bed and everything. So, right now, that's the screen that we're looking at using, and we're making changes in order to improve and get stuff the way that we ultimately would like it. But it shouldn't be considered a machine that's going to ship, it took us, we put it together in 3 months. That's not nobody has said I'm going to ship a machine that I built in 3 months, basically.
That is not the finished product, as they say, and it's typical for any company to launch, when they launch their first prototype. American, they came out with Houdini. It was far from being ready for production, pretty much all of them. The only one now that impressively will not display a game until it's ready for the production line is Chicago Gaming. Doug Duba has a policy, and that's why their game is not here. They had 2 little features that were not ready on their new game, and he said he wasn't going to put it out there until it was 100%. He wasn't going to put something out at 98%.
I mean, that's a respectable way to do it, too. We just like bringing the game and let people play it and kind of see how it evolves, and it opens us up to some criticism, but we want people to enjoy it and kind of see the process as we go along. It's kind of just if you can't tell, we're different already. We drink a lot of Diet Mountain Dew and all that. We do stuff different.
And the other, he said he had not played a game. None of us have played a single game on that game. I haven't even hit the flippers on it yet.
It was a little, so everybody kind of mobbed our booth when we opened at 5 o'clock, and I had to deal with Translate sales, and I'm calling Jimmy going, hey, I just turned it on. I haven't played it. I think it works, but can you come and stand next to it for a few minutes? It was like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute at the time, but it crazily seemed to work out.
Yeah, the only thing we've done with it is with the glass off, just tested it. And one of the reasons with that was that when we took the playfield out and had it recoated, we didn't want to run a ball across it until we felt like it had cured. And the second part of it is we were putting assemblies on and testing those assemblies, and literally up to the last day, we were still doing that.
We were putting decals on the ramps, decals on the spinners. We spent almost, from the time we brought it in Thursday to Friday at open at 5, we were still tweaking things, adjusting switches. And, we knew it would work if we touched a target or did stuff like that. We were fairly confident in it, but we never had played a full game through it because we clear coated the playfield. We took it apart on a Saturday. It got cleared on a Monday. We picked it up on a Wednesday, and the game was back together by that Saturday. So within a week, we took it out, had it cleared, put it back together. And as James said, we didn't want, no matter if they baked it or what you do with a clear coat, the longer you can let it cure, the less dimpling, the less trouble you're going to have with it. So we weren't using white gloves while we were triggering and stuff, but we were trying to keep the ball travel on the playfield to a minimum until. So we went from no balls on the playfield to, 7 or 8 hours of constant play yesterday, and we've been pretty happy with how the clear coat has held up.
Yeah, the game has held up. We didn't know. Like I said, we didn't play it, and the entire time it's been constantly being played. There's been a line, and we haven't had a chance to stand in line because we've been busy, but we've only had 2 hiccups on the thing. There's bugs in the software, which is typical, but as far as there was one motor, it went through one sequence yesterday, and we don't know what it was. We'll have to figure out what it was, where it locked up, and that was it. And we reset it, and that sequence apparently has not come back around. And we had one situation where the drop target reset, and the drop target was stuck in the high position. That's been it. So.
Other than the time you told me it was on fire and I started dashing
Yeah,
for
that
it,
was
but
he was over there
we
talking.
like to play jokes on each other, and that was one I unfortunately fell for.
Actually, it was the 2 of them. They were talking, and I ran up and said, "Did y'all know the game's on fire?" And he had this look, and he started to run, and then he's like, "Oh, crap, that's James." Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
Right now, it has LEDs on it, actually all LEDs on it. Oh, sorry, he asked if we were going to use incandescents or LEDs. The P-Rock system we're using their PD LED board, which, I kind of get into some technical stuff here, but only outputs 22 milliamps to each channel. So it's not enough to drive an incandescent without putting a relay board in between it. And Jimmy's still tweaking timings and things like that. So we mentioned the oscilloscope, the old our kind of ancient oscilloscope, but we've been working on the timings.
Number 4.
And so right now we have lamp boards, individual lamp boards in most of them. There are 7 other lamps in it that go through a relay board just because we're using, traditional LED lamps that need higher than the 3.3 volts that come off the PD LED board. Those would be the start buttons and the ramp lamps and stuff like that. So right now we're heading down the LED path. I don't see any reason why we would move away from that at this point. But
And for emulation, we're taking special care to emulate the timing of the incandescents so that the lamp shows and all that are nice and cohesive. So that's what we're going to be looking at there. But yeah, right now the LEDs are just, they're performing really well. And we'll make sure that, that those remain serviceable and things like that so you can actually change them out if you want. Yes, yeah, same deal. Absolutely. Same deal for Lex.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Hey, when you took the guy's game apart, are you using his playfield, his cabinet, and all that to build your own game for the PR Rock 3?
What's that?
When you took your friend's game, Kingpin game, are you using a playfield, the cabinet, and all that to build your own game out of it?
are we using
Did we use-
original Capcom parts?
Yeah, we're using
The
original Capcom
playfield
parts.
and cabinet and stuff. Are those original parts?
Yes. You're talking about the cabinet?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
So
you
we've
use
got,
his-
we've got the original drawings for the cabinet. So all that is, again, that goes back to where the cache of drawings that I acquired really comes in handy. Without that stuff, the task is made so much easier by having the access to those kind of
If we
things.
can find them, we kind of have our own version of Houdini in our shop. Is we'll be working on the game and we'll put something down and like a tool down, and 10 seconds later we turn around and we can't find it. The tool had Houdini'd on us, and we spend more time looking for stuff than probably. actually doing
It's quite an amazing thing. We could literally be standing and not move 2 feet and somehow lose something. And I would say that we probably could have built that game in a month and a half if we didn't have to continuously look for things. That's just the way we are. We somehow our brains are locked on one thing and we put stuff down. That's,
So is he ever going to get his game back? Is that guy ever going to get his game back together? The Kingpin, the one you're using?
Steve getting the game.
oh, who's getting this particular game?
Well, I mean, the game that you copied off of.
Oh, he still got the game. That game stayed where
Oh,
it was at.
the game that we took apart, that's still at his house. We did put it back together. We did sort of make the joke that when it was all apart, that we were going to leave, but we put it back together. Now, that's an original Kingpin. Yeah, we took it apart and
And
put
we
it
were
back
like-
together. And the remarkable thing, when we got there, we played the game and it played okay. And we were like, yeah, Mark Ritchie said something about he might want to tweak with a couple of things here and there. And we were, yeah, it's a good playing game. But when we took it apart, we found some things that were not working. One of the thumper bumper rings was broken and a couple of the switches weren't working. We cleaned the playfield, put it back together, and when we played it, that game played
Played like a
so
completely different
nice
game.
that we just realized we don't have to do a thing to it to make it a great playing game. It is, when it's working, it is a great playing game.
We're kind of
It
like
really is.
pinball Boy Scouts, so when we had access to pinball circus, we took it, well, we didn't take it apart, but we left it better than we found it, and we did the same with the Kingpin when we had access to it, you know, just, yeah, it got waxed, I think, we went, it played awesome.
Yes, sir, with a question.
Earlier on the slides, I saw some other art. Was that like proto art from Capcom, or what was that, the Kingpin art? Yeah, that right
Oh,
there.
we didn't even touch on that. When we first thought about the idea of redoing Kingpin, we were talking with Mark Ritchie, and he was telling us that the cabinet was good, the playfield was good, but he didn't particularly like the way the
Backlight
translite
was
looked.
too dark.
It was too dark, it was not sharp. And so we decided, Paul and I and Mark, that we'd see if Dave Christensen would do some artwork for it, different artwork. So we commissioned Dave Christensen to do some custom artwork for Kingpin. He's done a back glass and he's done some cabinet, and I believe that is the,
Right side, probably.
yeah, that's the right side of the cabinet.
One of the interesting things about the cabinet art is a lot of times they will mirror image the left side to make it the right side. Well, Dave actually made completely separate artwork for the other side by changing the perspective of the car. So you see the guy with the machine gun. Well, on the other side of the game, you see the other side of the machine gun as if you were looking at him from the other side. If you mirrored it, the guy driving the car would be on the wrong side of the car on the other side of the
Yeah,
cabinet.
if you look at
He
this
corrected all
cabinet,
of that.
if you look at this cabinet, the one side, it's American, and on the other side, it's an English. So Dave did, he made it American on both sides as far as the steering wheel's on the left. Our intentions with Dave's artwork is to do a limited edition version of Kingpin, which will have his artwork on it. The production will be of the original artwork with Stan going in and cleaning up when I say cleaning up, finishing the translate, because he basically didn't get a chance to finish it up. He just drew it out, they colored it in, and they never really vectorized it and had it production ready. So there's,
You know, and Dave's art is kind of it's not final artwork. It's more than a concept as he colored it in and all that. But this isn't the final artwork that will be on the game. Kingpin's one word. There's modifications. Dave drew some of the ladies as more close to his age, maybe, than we would like. So there are some changes and updates that need to be cleaned up on it.
Dave is severely old school. He does not own a cell phone. He does not own a computer. He does not own a fax machine. The most modern technology he has in his house is a telephone with an old answering machine. He does have DirecTV, and that's it. So he does his drawings old school, the way they did it back at Bally in the 70s and early 80s. So what he does is he does the black line, and then he makes a copy of that, and then he goes back and colors it. Dave does not work with paint. He only did one painting ever, and that was the original back glass for Nitro Ground Shaker. He did watercolor on it. Everything Dave does is either with marker or crayon. So the way it worked back in the day was he would do his concept, and then it would be sent over to the art department, and they would colorize it for screening. That's what he did here. He's got the rough artwork, And we need to go in and basically do what the art department at Valley did, but do it in a more modern way where we do it in a computer, vectorize it, and fill it all in. So it looks, this is hand-drawn as it was originally, needs to be cleaned up in order for it to be put into a game. Also, the back glass itself, we went ahead and printed 13 back glasses with his original hand-drawn art on it, just as a limited run, because I think it's neat. Some people look at it and say, well, it looks amateurish, but it's not. It's actually just the raw art, the way he would draw it, and his raw art was actually done in crayon after he took a copy of the black line. So that's the background on that artwork.
Yes, sir, with a question. We'll keep it short for you.
Sure. Going back to the HD version of the code, was the code for the game completely finished, or are there gaps for the HD version that you're looking to fill in terms of the code? And for the art, is Stan going to redo any of the art for HD to have it colorized, or did he do the DMD graphics in the original game?
So the HD side, as far as we've been talking to the team members, the code was mostly complete, and I would say it's somewhere in the mid-90s as far as they were concerned. Talking to the Dots guy, Kevin, he sent us a list of, hey, if I had more time while I was at Capcom, I would have done, we wanted to add these extra handful of things. I don't know if it was 10 or 12 things. It was not a huge list, but a handful of things. And they weren't like very large things. It wasn't like entire new huge modes or a different wizard mode. It was, I want to tweak this this one segment in the display, of an animation or things like that. So on the HD side, our goal is to basically start with recreate what the current rule set is, and then try and fill in some of those holes. And as we see areas that are capable of improving or enhancing, we'll do that. I mean, it may be a thing where the code keeps evolves as more people play it, and they go, oh, it would be neat if it did this, or it would be neat if it did that, and it's something that could be constantly evolving. Once we get it to the base, this is what the game was like originally, and then we can enhance it. I don't know that we're not talking about significantly rewriting every rule or anything. It's going to be heavily inspired by the original game.
Yeah. Mark Ritchie and the programmers, the original code, they said they were really only about 3 to 4 weeks away from having it completed. The gaps in it, if you call them gaps, is basically speeding it up, compressing it, making it better. Jimmy knows more about that than I. But it's and you asked about Stan and the HD graphic. The graphics on the display were done by the Dot people. Stan's artwork is strictly the cabinet translate. Stan is going to work on the translate. He approached us and said, hey, I'd like to finish it. So he is going to finish it for us. And one thing that we, with the remake, one thing that we are doing is we are going to include Mark and Stan, the original designer and the artist, with royalties off of the game. We feel like we are using something they created, and it's only right that they should be rewarded for the work that they did, even though it was back in the 90s. It's their work, and we feel like they should be rewarded, and they will be. And it also helps us because they're more excited about it, so.
James, we like to say James likes to make a short story long. So if you have any other questions, we'll be out in the back and be happy to talk to you for